Good day again. This is Libertas. We're here with episode 5 of American Christmas. Thus far, we have looked at the records of the conception of Jesus Christ by the Holy Spirit with the Virgin Mary, her time with Elizabeth before she went back home and let her husband know, or her espoused husband, Joseph, know that she was 3 months pregnant already before they had consummated their marriage and the ramifications of that. Then we looked at the actual birth, dealing with the swaddling clothes and the shepherds in the fields. Now we're going to look at the record of the Magi, and we're going to pinpoint with historical and biblical accuracy the actual time and date of that event, of the birth. So with that in mind, we are going to share screen and look at those records in the Holy Bible. And here we see in Matthew, it's called the visit of the Magi. And just a little refresher, all four of the Gospels look at a different aspect of the Savior's mission on earth. Matthew talks about his kingship. Mark talks about him being the servant. Luke talks about his manhood. And the Gospel of John talks about his being the Son of God. So here we see the Magi coming to present gifts from one king to another king. So this is very important of the kingship aspect of the birth of Christ. And this is the only gospel that accentuates or focuses primarily on that goal. If you want more information on this, go to a Bible program such as the Blue Letter Bible here, and then go to the search bar and search the word branch, and it'll tell you in the Old Testament, the branch is another reference to the Messiah and the four different aspects of his mission. And that's why we have four gospels, is to explain those aspects. Uniquely significant. It's not what Matthew eyewitness account was, and it's not what John's eyewitness accounts was. It's what God inspired them to write. We always have to remember that part of biblical research. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, this can also be translated after. If you look here, and it gives you the definition here of the words for Jesus. It's in the way the verbs are conjugated, and but see, this was born. This is past tense. So it's a weak translation in English, but it's really hard sometimes to conjugate the right verbs from Greek into English. So after, it should read, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. First thing we got to look at, who are these wise men? There came wise men from the east. Now, what is from the east? Babylon, maybe? It says Magos. And it comes down here and it explains a magus, the name given by the Babylonians, later called the Chaldeans, Medes, Persians, and others, to the wise men, teachers, priests, physicians, astrologers, seers, interpreters of dreams, agers, soothsayers, sorcerers, etc. The wise men of Babylon. The Oriental wise men, astrologers, who having discovered by the rising of a remarkable star that the Messiah had just been born, came to Jerusalem to worship him. So why would wise men from the east, or specifically Babylon, care about a star in the heavens? Well, it's real simple. If you go back and you read the book of Daniel, you see the records of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. They were captives in Babylon under different kings. However, in each of those four men, they were subjected to disobeying the edicts or the mandates of the king at the time to worship the way that king wanted them to worship. And they said, no, you can kill us if you want, but our God will protect us for telling the truth, which he did. But also, Daniel at the very beginning was able to interpret the dream and tell the king what the dream was, as well as interpret it, where all the wise men of the kingdom could not do it. Therefore, the king decreed that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would not only be rulers over the kingdom, but second only in authority to the king himself, and that those guys were to teach his wise men the ways of their God, not necessarily to worship that God, because they didn't change from being a pagan country to being a Jewish country at the time, but they did respect the king of those men, the God of those men, excuse me. So that's how they knew what to look for when they recognized that star. Remember, the shepherds in the fields are not recorded as seeing anything spectacular in the heavens. The angels were standing next to them. Although brilliantly lit with the glory of God, they were still standing there on the ground. And they're coming to the king of Judea, Herod. This is another important aspect in the dating of the story. We saw in Luke that Augustus was the Caesar. So he had a reign during a certain period of time, which we know from history. Cyrenius was a governor in Syria, which is part of this land mass where Jerusalem was at the time. So he had a definite time in office. And then here we see Herod, the king of Judea. He was a Judean king, but he was a puppet under the Caesar of Rome. But Rome didn't always just go in and wipe out the whole entire populations, or burn and pillage and destroy the areas that they conquered, because they wanted the tribute money. And so they would leave a lot of the local politicians in positions of authority so that they could continue the day-to-day affairs without the Romans having to do it themselves, but they were still subject to the kings or to the Caesars. So anyway, you have those three parameters, so we can triangulate through history what scope of time fits the administration of all three of those men simultaneously. But these guys show up in Jerusalem unannounced, and the first thing they say to the king of the Jews is, "Where is he that is born king of the Jews?" That got Herod's attention. "For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." Now, his star, we know, is Jupiter. They were called wandering stars, the planets were. And that's kind of the Latin word for planet, is wandering star. This is a book called Jesus Christ, our promised seed. And it was published in 1982. You can find it on eBay, sometimes on Amazon, but it covers all the historical and celestial events leading up to the birth of Christ. But we do know that it was the planet Jupiter was known as the King Star. The constellation Leo was representative of the tribe of Judah. The Bible originally was written in the stars. So all 12 signs of the zodiac represent one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Now it's been bastardized or counterfeited. The truth has been turned into a lie, and it's in a thing called astrology, not astronomy. Okay, we're talking astronomy here, not astrology. So when these guys saw the planet Jupiter in conjunction with the King Star in the constellation of Leo, known as Regulus, that got their attention. And so here's just a little graph that you can see what I'm talking about. So when they saw his star in the east, that means in astronomical terms, that's when that star first appeared above the horizon before sunrise. So, and I live under the sign of Scorpio, which means that constellation is prominent. You can see it in the sky all night long during a certain time of the year. So it's approximately a month when we're under the sign of Scorpio. Here they're talking about the sign of Leo, which is the sign for Judah. So they first saw this in 3 BC, and they started watching it, and they started seeing all these things, and they were remembering back to what Daniel had taught them about the coming Messiah of the Israelites, of the Judeans, excuse me. The Israelites, the 10 tribes, they were captive in Assyria. The Judeans, which was the tribe of Judah, and I think Dan, I could be mistaken on that one, but 2 tribes went to Babylon. And they were known as the Judeans. So anyway, they've been watching this conjunctions or grouping of the stars in Leo and Regulus and Jupiter and Saturn and Venus and the moon and all these different things for quite some time. And they realized that they were witnessing the signs that David had told them. So they're asking Herod, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, needless to say. You don't come and ask a king where the new king is. But they couldn't do anything to these guys because they're emissaries from another king. They're there with a caravan full of treasure. It's not three little boxes like a kid's jewelry box that they're presenting. It's and we'll get there when it gets to what they're doing. But they traveled in a caravan because even if it's just the wise men, they're emissaries of another kingdom, and they have to have a bunch of bodyguards and servants. And here's another thing: how many wise men and what were their names? Well, right here it just says wise men came. So it doesn't tell you anything about what their names were, and it doesn't tell you anything about how many there were. It just says a bunch of them came. So why don't we just leave it at that? The song is nice for Christmas, We Three Kings, but no biblical truth in it. So Herod's troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Now the people on the streets, they really don't care. they're not paying attention to anything. If you just think about yourself, do you pay attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C. very much? Not really. I mean, you listen to it somewhat, maybe sometimes, but you really don't pay a lot of attention to it. If it gets bad enough, somebody will call you. But here, all of the leadership and government of Jerusalem is representative of the king. They're all really concerned about this. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. And so they're all puffy and satisfied. Well, here's what the scriptures say. You know, if I were Herod, I would say, well, why the hell didn't you know this was happening? If you knew this was coming, why didn't you know anything about this? But that's just a conjecture, educated guess of what they might have been talking about. You can call it my own private interpretation if you would like. Then Herod, when he had privily means privately, called the wise men, and inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. Diligently means exactly what it says, to know accurately or exactly, and to investigate diligently. Just like in a court case, you've got to have precise, exact evidence in order to convict someone of a crime. You can't just go in there with hearsay. And what time? When did this star, chronology? What's the chronology of these events? You know, time, either short or long. You know, what's the whole chronology? What convinced you that this was happening? But he wanted to know exactly when that was. And he sent them, the wise men, to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also. And when they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Astronomically, what they were looking at was when they left Jerusalem to go the 5 miles to Bethlehem, they could see that star above in the direct line of Bethlehem, much like we would look at the North Star to see our bearings and our directions. Okay, that star didn't just travel and then stop over Bethlehem. But it's also to understand that nobody saw that celestial occurrence up there. The scribes and the wise men in Jerusalem had no idea. King Herod had no idea. The shepherds had no idea. So it wasn't anything spectacular or abnormal, like a nova exploding or a comet or a meteor or any of those kind of things. It was just simple conjunctions of planets within constellations and stars that signified what was happening. And when they were come into the house, now, Jesus was born in a barn. He was born in a stable with a manger. Okay? So these guys came into the house. Now, did God mean house or did he mean manger? Or, animal stall with a manger in it? Was he confused when his own son was born and how he was born? Did he get the record wrong? No. When they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshiped him. And they opened their treasures. And and when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another route, another way. These guys, when they found the house where Mary and the young child, remember we showed you that the word for infant was briefos. Here it is paidion. It's a young child. See, young child, little child, young child, damsel. Okay. And he's not in swaddling clothes. A babe, a newborn, is wrapped in swaddling clothes for a very short amount of time. A young child would be considered a toddler, meaning he can walk around a little bit, maybe gibberish a little bit, probably still using a diaper, can't talk, but he's a young child. He is not an infant or newborn any longer. So there's been a time period that it took these guys to travel from Babylon to Jerusalem after they were convinced of what they saw in the heavens. For the details of that, you need to get that book. You can also get a book called Witness of the Stars by a man named E.W. Bullinger. He got a lot of this stuff started in the 1800s. He also has some great books on it's called How to Enjoy the Bible, and another one called Numbers and Scriptures. But any works by E.W. Bullinger are great for learning how to study the Bible and different aspects of it. But they open their treasures. So if you think of it, when a king is sending an emissary to another king, he's bringing a tribute to not only bless that other king, but bring them something that's significant to the wealth of the king that's sending the gift. So that's why it doesn't say, I think this just means treasure. The place in which good and precious things are collected and laid up, a casket, coffer, or other receptacle in which valuables are kept. So this would be a casket, a coffer, or other receptacle, something that would hold a treasure. If you think about it in light of the treasures that the pirates in the Caribbean, when they're big chests of treasures, that would be more along the lines of what we're talking about here. But they consisted of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, three of the most precious trade commodities in that era. But God told them after they had done this that don't go back to Herod. And they listened to the angel. You know, God came to him, warned of God in a dream. At every other point in this narrative, it was always Gabriel. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise and take the young child and his mother and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. So here again, he's fulfilling the prophecies of the Old Testament. He had to go into Egypt for a time. Nobody knew what that meant until it was actually fulfilled. But God made sure that this family was financially viable to make such a trip and to live there without any concerns. And we also know as an adult, Jesus had very expensive clothing. That's why he was recognized as a rabbi on the streets and why the Roman soldiers were casting lots for his tunic. It was very expensive stuff. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth and sent forth and slew all the children. Here's that word children again, not newborn infants, that were in Bethlehem and all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, in Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph, saying, you can go back to Israel now because Herod's dead. So it's not necessarily Gabriel. It could have been, but it says an angel instead of the angel. Just a little tidbit there. But we do know, back to the narrative of the time and the date of this event, that according to the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, he lived in Jerusalem during this time. He describes Jesus, and while he was alive, he mentions his crucifixion, but he also mentions Herod in the historical part of this, that Herod died in what we would call today 1 BC. So that's before Christ. So we live in AD, Anno Domini, which is Latin for in the year of our Lord Christ. So we live in 2021 years dated from the birth of Christ. But Herod died in 1 BC. So the modern calendar is off by a little bit, which is understandable, but still it was off a little bit. And we also showed in the other records with the fields and the flocks and the shepherds that it had to be at harvest time in the fall. So with that in mind, I'm going to tell you exactly when Jesus was born. The Old Testament, the New Year, and also a festival called the Feast of Trumpets, Jewish New Year, and or Rosh Hashanah, would always happen on the 7th month of the year on the first day, which is Tishri. Now, the Judean calendar is a lunar calendar and not the Gregorian calendar that we have today. So it goes on lunar cycles. So there are 13 full moons in a year. So here, the Feast of Trumpets, they would blow trumpets at sunset. Sunset was when the new day began for the Jewish day. So at sunset, they would begin blowing the shofar trumpets, signifying the new year of the reign of the king. This year, they were blowing it in celebration of the reign of the new king, the Messiah, the only begotten Son of God, the heir to the throne of David, without even knowing it. They had no concept that the Savior had been born. And yet God had set that in motion all the way back in Exodus and Deuteronomy and all that time frame, with the Feast of Trumpets being blown to signify the reign of the king, the new year of the reign of the king. So this year they were doing it. Now, Tishri 1, the only time that the Feast of Trumpets lines up in that time frame between these historical figures was our modern calendar date of September the 11th, 9/11, was the birth of Jesus Christ. It's documented over time and time again, historically, biblically, and astronomically. Sunset on that day was at 6 o'clock. So this work here goes by the astronomical occurrences of when the planets were in a certain configuration, which is when the moon was under Virgo, which was a constellation of a woman, and the moon was juxtaposed under her feet for about a 43-minute period of time before it set over the horizon. But other astronomers, about 20-something years, or actually it would be more like almost 40 years after this work was done, got it further to 6 p.m. using the astronomy dealing with the birth of the Virgin Virgo and the moon being under her feet. So with that in mind, September the 11th, 3 BC at sunset was the birth of Jesus Christ. Sunset, it's really close to the equinox, so it would be equal amounts of time between day and night. So 6 o'clock would be very appropriate with the daylight, the sun clock. So there you go. September the 11th, 3 BC at sunset was the Feast of Trumpets, Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, which correlates to the modern calendar, September the 11th, 3 BC. So we will close out here. And the next segment, the last segment, segment 6, I will answer the questions definitively of whether or not America should celebrate Christmas and any correlation at all between Christmas and the United States of America. So with that in mind, until next time, au revoir. And you can find our stuff at libertyman.online. That's libertyman.online. Good night. God bless. You're the best.